So Gideon, thank you so much for joining me today. We're really lucky to have you to contribute to AI House this year.
Great
Um,
to be here.
Before we jump into the questions, I want to give everyone a quick background of a sense of who you are, because it's truly remarkable what you did. So you began your career as a science and tech writer at The Economist, and then spent years reporting from places like Mexico City, Jerusalem, Moscow, before you moved to New York. Then you led the MIT Technology Review, and you were an editor-in-chief at Wired, and now you write about how to reinvent democracy for the 21st century at your Substack Futurepolis, among many other activities. So, with that kind of range, from journalism, technology, and global reporting, you've become one of the most insightful voices, helping people to make sense of what's happening in AI. So, it's a real pleasure to have you on the other side of the question this time. So, thank you.
Of course.
So I will start right with the questions. I think let's start with the bigger picture. In your view, what are some of the most common misunderstandings about AI? What you're trying to help people see very clearly?
I think maybe the biggest misunderstanding, which is one that's been very much promoted by the AI industry, is that AI is this kind of one thing that we're building towards, this sort of like super intelligence, and eventually we'll get there and it'll be super smart and it'll be able to do everything and it'll be like us, only just way, way smarter. I think the reality is we're going to see many different kinds of AI, often very specialized, often very dumb. We're going to have millions, if not billions, of different AIs that are working for us in all kinds of different realms. There will be some that are very, very sophisticated that are helping solve really difficult scientific problems. There are going to be some that are really stupid that are helping you buy your airline tickets. I don't think there's going to be one, even at the very high sophisticated level. I don't think we're going to see like one overarching super intelligence. I think the notion that we are is really promoted by the AI industry because it needs to justify the huge investment that's going into it. And the way to justify it is to create the claim that they're building this world-changing thing that once it exists, it will be an entirely new step in technological evolution like nothing we've ever seen before.
Yeah, wow, that's really an interesting take to see it as different kinds of intelligence. But given that like broadness, how like does the media cover AI in that sense? Like which areas do you think are like underreported and which one feel a bit overhyped? And why do you think that imbalance exists?
Yeah, so I think, the things that are overhyped are, this idea of a super intelligence. I want to make clear it's not that I think AI is not going to be a very important technology. I think it could have hugely disruptive effects. I just want to challenge this myth of like, the kind of the godlike intelligence. But so I do think that gets overhyped. I think things like humanoid robots in our homes doing a lot of work for us are also overhyped. I think with robotics as with AI, we're going to see that they can be incredibly good at certain things and then really bad at certain adjacent or similar things. We're never going to get to like total capability in any one of those areas. I think the thing that's underreported is what is actually happening with AI kind of at a very granular level. So we talk a lot about job loss and job replacement, but what does it look like for AI in well, how AI is affecting individual jobs? How are people's work days changing? What are they learning? What do they have to alter and how they function? Similarly, what does AI adoption actually look like at a granular level in organizations and companies? What are the problems they're running into? There was this MIT study a couple of months ago that said that 95% of adoption efforts by enterprises are failing or are not returning a return on investment. But what does it actually look like in practice? I think that is the stuff that people want to know and that would be helpful to us in understanding what this technology is actually doing. And perhaps the reason that that is not getting covered and the hype stuff is getting covered is the reality is just kind of messy and often rather boring. There are not these great dramatic stories about somebody adopting AI in the enterprise. And so the media tends to gravitate towards the stories of incredible accomplishments or wild speculations. Um, the how AI affects us day to day is just a little harder to make an interesting story out of.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's also the role of media at some point, what it really is. But very interesting. And then, so if I can ask, like more on a personal note, Like what
Mm.
emerging AI trends excite you the most right now? And for example, you can think of like what topic surprised you or forced you to reassess your thinking in a topic in AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think as it has progressed, I have, like everybody, probably been forced to revise my thinking about what it is and isn't capable of. I think that the latest little revelation for me is I've started to use it more as a kind of an editor, not in the sense of saying to it, take this article and edit it. It does a really bad job at that, but saying, look at this article and give me some feedback. And I'm doing the articles I've written, I'm doing with the book proposal I'm writing. And if you give it the right prompt and the right amount of context, it can be surprisingly good at challenging your thinking and making you go down avenues you hadn't thought of. And obviously, you don't take all of its recommendations. Obviously, you fact check whatever it says, but in kind of like shaking you out of your complacency, it can be sometimes really useful. So that has been exciting to me. And I think for anyone who's kind of in knowledge work, that sort of AI as provocateur is a really promising thing. The other thing I guess, excited by is that I feel like AI has a similar potential that the early internet did in terms of just lowering the barriers, lowering the friction to keep a small scale entrepreneurship,
Hmm.
um, small scale, activism of different kinds. When it became possible for people to create websites or do email newsletters or social media, it really enabled them to expand their reach and to communicate with the world in a way that would never have been possible before. AI, I think, gives people the opportunity to automate a lot of the boring stuff that is involved in running a small business or running a campaign. It enables them to vibe code websites they wouldn't have been able to do on their own. And so I think all of that kind of lowering barriers to entry um, creates a whole new slew of opportunities, just like the early internet did for people to do stuff. Some of it bad stuff, of course, as
Yeah.
well, but hopefully a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you can almost say it kind of enhances or gives room a bit to our creativity. Really
Yeah.
great. And recently you've been working on the idea of public AI. You've been quite vocal about it, especially the work included in Switzerland at the model. And what drew you to that topic, and how do you define public AI in that context?
Yeah. So public AI, the easiest shorthand is it's AI as public infrastructure, but really it's the notion of AI that is either built or controlled by governments rather than controlled entirely by the private sector. And so in practice, what could that mean? That could mean literally data centers and chips that are available to scientific researchers to do research on, or compute power that is available to small businesses to write AI models. Or it could be models that are designed to be useful for certain functions that are socially important, or models that are trained on a country's local data so that they provide answers that are specific to the local context, or models that are trained on data that has not been copyrighted or stolen, or that is clean, that is, more carefully selected than a lot of the data that goes into models today. So all of these ways in which you could make AI that in one way or another is better designed to serve the public interest rather than to serve the profit line of big companies. And the reason I'm interested in that is I do think the big companies have way too much control. And it's not just that their commercial priorities define what kind of AI gets built, and cause them to scrape a lot of data that they shouldn't really have access to, or to just ingest a lot of really bad quality data. It's also that they own, as it were, the means of production. They could choose to cut off access to models, or make them really expensive. There may be national security concerns if an AI company has access to all the data that people in a country are putting into its model. So having the idea of having AI that governments, or better still, the public in some form, maybe mediated through governments, can control, or can have a say in how it's built, I think it's appealing. The question, of course, is the immediate question that always comes up is, how can a country build its own AI that competes with OpenAI or Anthropic or one of these companies that's pulling in tens or hundreds of billions of dollars? And I think the answer has to be that it's not meant to compete. It's not meant to compete on like size and scale and capability. It's more that's meant to offer something different. Like I said, more designed with a public interest in mind. And so then it becomes a question of, you don't need the massive resources to build this public AI, but you still need decent resources. And will countries be able to put that money in and see enough of value from it to keep on doing it? I think that's still an open question.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. Raises so many questions of governance and like public infrastructure in this. But yeah, super interesting. And I mean, to get back now a bit to your field of work, because I think that's also like an opportunity for us to understand right now. So, as AI reshapes how information is created and shared, what do you think this means for media organizations and journalists? And what concerns you the most about the relationship between AI and the media going forward?
Yeah. So the one thing that AI cannot replace in journalism is actual reporting, like shoe leather reporting, calling people up, persuading them to give you information that they don't want you to give, that they don't want to give you, figuring out that there is information hidden somewhere in a data set, or in an archive, and figuring out how to get hold of it, going and talking to people on the street. There is so much of journalism that an AI cannot do, because what an AI can do is essentially scrape the internet
Yeah,
and analyze vast chunks of information. But if it's not on the internet, it doesn't exist from an AI's point of view. So that is still an essential function of journalism that I don't think is going to go away. The problem is, how do the media organizations make money off of that? Um, it may be very valuable and unique information, but valuable to whom?
yeah,
To the general public, okay, but then what? How do you put a monetary figure on that? To democracy, again, how do you put a monetary figure on that? And so news organizations are, battling with this question. What is, how do they make money off this reporting? And they're being hugely challenged, because one of the impacts of AI is, I think, that fewer and fewer things that are written, whether it's by journalists or commentators or even artists, fewer and fewer of those things are actually going to be read by people.
yeah.
More and more, the stuff is going to be read by AI, which is going to ingest it. And then people will get that information by asking an AI about a subject, and it will base its answer on lots and lots of things that it has read. So, so that obviously is one way in which it makes it difficult for the media companies to compete and to have a business model. And then, I think they will have to get very smart about using AI themselves as a form of distribution. I think they can't use AI to substitute for the reporting. I don't think they should use it to substitute for the writing, but they could use AI to repackage a story in many, many different ways, to break it up into social media posts, to create a video format, or a podcast format, or even a cartoon format, to take the same story and bundle it in lots and lots of different ways and figure out how to reach different audiences with it. That's, I think, going to be a really important role for them. But it still doesn't solve the business model question for media, and nobody that I know has a good answer for that yet. The one thing, the one piece of hope maybe is that, you know, I've been, I've been in journalism for 30 years. I've been in digital media for 15 years, and it's gone through something like half a dozen business model reinventions in those 15 years, and it keeps on doing it. And a lot of media have closed down, a lot of journalists have lost their jobs, but some still survive, and some have figured out ways to operate in this new sphere. So I think some at least will figure out how to operate in the AI sphere.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's like any industry really has to redevelop their business to find the new
Yeah.
market.
Yeah. I'll say also one more thing I think it's worrying about this kind of AIification of media is that the more that the more that people get their information from a chatbot rather than by reading stuff, the more it kind of flattens the information landscape. You're not engaging directly with the writing and thinking of a human being. You're getting a distillation of it through a model that may give you access to in some ways it gives you access to a broader perspective, but it's a single kind of single mush of a broad perspective. You're not engaging with individual points of view of different people in the
Yeah,
same way. And so I think that creates a kind of maybe a loss of critical thinking.
yeah. I mean, we that's been talked about since ChatGPT came in. But yeah, I mean, and then so I think that goes very well like to the last question that I want to ask you. Kind of looking ahead, you having this broad picture, what skill set do you think are becoming more and more important in the AI age to have?
Yeah, so I think there are the skill sets that have to do with AI, and then there are the skill sets that have to do with the things AI cannot do. So I think we will need to be comfortable with using AI tools and constantly learning new ones. It's not like in the old days of the web where or of computing where you could like learn Microsoft Word and then you were good, or learn HTML or learn Python, and then you basically had a structure that you could use. I think that AI is going to continue evolving very fast. The ways that we use it now are really different from the ways we used it 6 months ago. We're going to have to learn new kinds of prompting. We're going to have to figure out what is possible with stringing different kinds of AI agents together. It's going to be this constant learning process, and so people are going to have to be comfortable with that constant evolution. But then the other thing they'll have to be good at is the things that AI cannot do, and that is, long-term strategic thinking.
Mm.
Um, it's negotiating with other people. It's really the whole messy business of the world that has much less to do with, information and data, and much more to do with human interaction, empathy, social awareness, um, just all the things that come from us being human. And that is, that's where we excel. That's where we have to ensure that we are constantly getting better as people, because that's probably, that's what's going to be left to us after the AIs all become PhDs.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's a great outlook that we get to use our human skills much more in the future. Well, thank you so much, Gideon, for all this input. I think we could easily keep going. There's so much depth in each of these topics. And this really gave us a lot to think about. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation and picking up these threads again in Davos in January. Yes, so thank you very much for participating and making us all a little smarter.
Thank you.